And time to take a look at what's been making headlines across the globe. And for that, I'm joined in the studio by Alison Sargent. Hello, Alison.
Hi, Annette.
You're starting with the migrant crisis at the Polish border with Belarus, with thousands of people gathering, hoping to enter the EU.
Polish tabloid Fact calls it an assault on Poland. They accuse Belarusian forces of firing shots into the air in order to scare migrants into trying to cross the border into Poland. The papers also included, you see there, a rather unflattering image of Belarusian leader Alexander Lukashenko. They accuse him of using migrants as political pawns to punish the EU for putting sanctions on Belarus. Now, Lukashenko sends the crowds. That's the headline from Poland's biggest newspaper, the Gazeta Wyborcza. The paper spoke to Poland's former ambassador to Russia, who said that the only thing that Lukashenko is afraid of is sanctions, and that, she says, is why Poland will need help from its allies. On Monday, the EU Commission president did call for a new round of sanctions on Belarus from the EU.
And the situation, not surprisingly, being closely watched here in Europe.
Yeah, Poland's border is the European border, and that's really how papers in Europe see it. German paper Der Tagesspiegel headlines, Lukashenko drives crowds of refugees to the EU border. The paper says that Belarus wants to create a serious incident here, that the refugees, who are mostly Iraqi Kurds, according to Der Tagesspiegel, wanted to try enter at a border crossing, but that they were driven into the forest area by Belarusian forces. The paper notes that Europe has been offering Poland assistance from its border agency Frontex for weeks, but that Poland's government keeps declining that offer. The paper says they want to manage the situation by building a border wall.
Now, a story that's been making a lot of headlines in Portugal, and that is Portuguese peacekeeping troops accused of trafficking diamonds and drugs in the Central African Republic.
Yeah, these troops were part of the UN's peacekeeping mission in Central African Republic. Portuguese papers report that they trafficked €1.5 million in diamonds, gold, and drugs, and that they did it using military airplanes, taking the goods from Central African Republic to Portugal. They were then transported by car to Belgium, where they were laundered into Bitcoin. Portuguese paper Jornal de Noticias reports that Portuguese police carried out a mass raid on Monday. They issued arrest warrants for 10 current and former members of the Portuguese military who are suspected of being involved in this.
Okay, now back here in France, we've got 5 months to go before the presidential elections, but it might be 5 months away, but certainly they're still making headlines, obviously.
It certainly is, Annette. Today, because right-wing candidates held their first primary debate. They have not chosen their candidate yet, and the gloves did not come off. That's according to Le Figaro. I actually learned this expression today in the headline of Le Figaro, fleuret moucheté. That's when in fencing you do not take the protective tip off the end of the sword, so you make sure you don't hurt anyone. Le Figaro writes that this attempt to play nice was very apparent. The 5 candidates trying very hard not to tear each other apart, because that could create problems later, of course. When things did get competitive, Le Figaro writes that the former EU Brexit negotiator Michel Barnier, he's the one with the blue tie, he was the main target. He was getting attacked by the 2 people on either side of him, Valérie Pécresse and Xavier Bertrand. Meanwhile, these 5 right-wing candidates are meeting again this Tuesday at commemorations marking the 51st anniversary of the death of Charles de Gaulle, and they're not the only candidates who are present. Libération writes that altogether 8 presidential hopefuls are attending this commemoration, including socialist Anne Hidalgo and far-right Florian Philippot. The paper writes that no matter their political leaning, they're all trying to use de Gaulle's legacy, a vibe that is well illustrated by this drawing here. It shows the candidates worshipping a statue of the general like some sort of cult leader.
Okay, now staying in France, and papers here have also been reacting to the Catholic Church recognising its responsibility for those thousands of sexual abuse cases by Catholic priests.
The church is going to pay. That's the main headline here from Le Parisien aujourd'hui en France. The Catholic Church announced that they are going to be paying reparations to thousands of victims who were identified in that landmark abuse report earlier this year. According to the paper, the church is actually going to be forced to sell some of its assets or to take out a loan in order to get the money to pay the victims. For Aujourd'hui en France, that response is a sign that the Catholic Church has really had a sincere wake-up call here here. Catholic paper La Croix agrees. The paper calls it a turning point and an unprecedented change in the church's mentality. The paper reports that victims have also been welcoming this announcement, although they do say that they're going to be watching very closely to make sure that the church lives up to its promises.
And finally, a really inspiring story about the power of perseverance, a tale for all of us, I think.
A tale for all of us, Annette. Every year, tens of thousands of birds, including eastern bar-tailed Godwits, migrate from their breeding grounds in the Arctic across the Pacific Ocean all the way to New Zealand. Well, this year, one of the 20 Godwits that's been fitted with a radio tracking device had made it 33 hours into that flight when heavy winds forced him to make a big U-turn and go all the way back to Alaska. 2 months later, though, Annette, I'm proud to report, as you saw in the Guardian headline, that this bird finally made it back to New Zealand. The paper calls it a feat of stunning perseverance. The manager at the Shorebird Center that tracks these birds says that this bird has actually failed to make that nonstop flight 3 times in the past year, but he has made it once again, and he's going to have plenty of time, the bird expert says, to get himself back into shape to fly all the way back to the Arctic for the next mating season.
Wow, what a tale, and sort of, a message there for all of us. Never give up.
Yeah, just keep flying. Fly, fly again.
Yes, indeed. Thanks for that, Alison.